Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
Well, here we are, week 2 of our Halloween extravaganza, which is always my favorite time of the year, both personally and for our podcast, because we get to do Halloween-themed movies. This time around, we decided to ask our patrons what movies that are Halloween-themed, because we have patrons now.
Yeah.
What Halloween-themed movies that we don't know about would you like us to do? And so we posed that question to them, and we got a nice pile of recommendations, actually. So that was nice. But we also posed it to everybody else on our Facebook page. Leisha and Heather both recommended The Houses October Built, which was a movie I had heard about, was on our Halloween list, but we bumped up to the top because they recommended it. I mean, you know, 2 people. You can't go wrong there. So here we are.
Right.
It's not just 1, but 2. The House is October Built from 2014. So that's a good solid, 8 years ago that this movie came out. And it was directed by a person named Bobby Rowe, written by Zach Andrews, Bobby Rowe, and Jason Zeta. When I researched this movie on IMDb, I realized that it seems like Bobby Rowe, Zach Andrews, and these folks haven't really done much beyond this film and the sequel to it. So
yeah, and I think it started out, they did a documentary first, right? Like, this movie, it's a found footage film about haunted attractions, like during the Halloween season. And I haven't watched it, but I think that it initially was a documentary on the same subject. And then they made this movie, which obviously is fiction, but I think that's where it started.
They must have used quite a bit of footage from their documentary for this, because they went out and filmed actual haunted attractions around the U.S. I don't know for sure, because I didn't do a ton of research, but it seems like a number of the interviews or whatever, it's presented as a found footage movie of some people who are setting out to do a documentary about the scariest haunted attractions in the U.S. during Halloween time. And I strongly suspect that a number of the people in this film, and quite a bit of the footage that we've seen, were literally just people at these haunted attractions.
Yeah.
Quite candid interviews with folks. So not acted at all. And then the plot of this movie sort of framed around it. And, you know, I don't know about you, Craig, but, well, I'm sure about you. I don't know, but I'm sure that you enjoy going out during Halloween time and enjoying some of these haunted attractions just as much as I do.
I do, but nobody else does, so I don't get to do it very much.
Alan's not into this, huh?
No. Oh, God, no. Absolutely not. Growing up, I always wanted to do these things, but my sister wasn't interested. I remember one year when we were little kids, my parents took us to a haunted house at a frat, which was probably, it had to have been my dad. I'm sure my mom had nothing to do with this, but my dad took us to a haunted house at a fraternity. I live in a college town. We have 3 universities in the town, the small town that I live in. And so every October, different fraternities put together haunted attractions. And my dad took me and my sister to one. And this is when we were little enough. I remember vividly. I have no idea what my costume was. I think maybe I was a clown or something, but my sister was a cat, and my parents were also. We were not wealthy growing up. I mean, we were. When I was a kid, my parents were still in school and working. You know, my dad worked in a factory and he worked in a grocery store. My mom was a nurse, and they were still both furthering their education. By the time I was a teenager, they had both finished their educations, had good jobs, so we were comfortable middle class. But when we were little, we didn't have a lot of money, and so my parents were not about spending money on Halloween costumes. So my sister was a cat, which means that she wore a dance outfit. A black leotard.
A black leotard, yeah.
Yeah, white tights, a pair of cat ears was probably the only thing that was purchased, and then one of my dad's black work socks stuffed full of stuff and pinned to her butt for a tail. Yeah. And we went through this haunted house, and I remember it was scary. It wasn't for kids. I also remember that the fraternity guys were very nice, and didn't try. They didn't go out of their way to scare us too bad because we were little kids. But I remember that my sister's tail fell off in the haunted house. And she was so distraught after we got out. Like, I don't remember if there were tears, but she was so distraught after we got out. And these fraternity boys, in these scary costumes, were so kind to us, and they went back inside and found her tail and brought it back out for us.
They pinned the tail back on your sister?
Yeah. I hope they let my dad do the pinning, but yeah, that's my big experience. But they do, around here every year they're like corn mazes and haunted houses and stuff. I haven't been to one in years, but I do love them. And so I was fascinated by the idea of this movie. I've seen it before it was recommended to us to watch. And I do enjoy it because I do like to see these real, haunted attractions, because some of them are really impressive, and I would really like to go, to some of the ones that you see here. But it makes for an interesting movie because it's really not plot heavy. It's really just them going around. They take us through these different haunted attractions, which is kind of fun to see. And there is a plot, but it's kind of, I don't know.
It's threadbare. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really threadbare. And ultimately, I will say, just throwing all my cards on the table right up front, it's a little disappointing. We have an international audience here. And so, the more I live abroad and travel abroad, the more I understand wholeheartedly that Halloween is a distinctly American holiday.
Yes.
Doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. However, over time, other parts of the world have adopted it. And so they may not have the same traditions. They may have created their own traditions. The idea of going through a haunted house, this sort of attraction where you're walking through something and getting scared, it's not unique to the U.S. But I think that in October, maybe people around the world don't realize that these attractions spring up around the United States. There are people who make their whole living with these things. If you drive a short distance from where you and I, spend a lot of time together to like Kansas City or St. Louis, some other big city. For example, in Kansas City, I went to high school not far from Kansas City. And so every October we would drive into Kansas City around Halloween time, where for the whole month there were these places. It's actually usually a really bad part of town that you wouldn't normally go into, except it's a little safer during this time because there's so much traffic and these haunted houses exist. There are old warehouses that back in the day were very bustling and since then have become abandoned and then purchased by people who have repurposed them into these haunted houses. And they're not open year-round. They're only open during the month of October, maybe a little bit into November, maybe a little bit into September.
Yeah.
And they pour a lot of money into these buildings to outfit them with different animatronics and different scenery and things like that every single year. And you can go, you pay some money, you walk through here with your friends, and you just get scared. And you wander through different scenes and things. It's so much fun.
It's super fun.
Yeah, it's super fun. And it's just, again, it's like watching a horror movie. We've talked about this before. It's a safe way to get scared, to sort of real life experience what it might be like to be besought by demons and monsters and things like that. But you're going to be okay. There might be, even in the smallest town, there might be 3 or 4 of these, varying in quality, but they're usually thrown together in some place they were able to rent out for a little while, but thrown together in earnest, and they're usually really fun to go through. As a kid in high school, my dad and I were enlisted to create our own haunted house for the local fall festival that was done by our middle school that my sisters were in. My sisters were in middle school, I was in high school. And so my dad and I got a measly $500 budget, and with that went out and bought lumber and props and all kinds of stuff and plotted out on paper and constructed this haunted house in the band room of the local middle school to put on. That was just loads of fun. Like, it's loads of fun being on the part of going through it. It's loads of fun being on the side of like putting these things together and scaring people. It's just one of my all-time favorite things to do during Halloween. And living in China, I just miss it so much. We used to do this as kids for like our families, like in my grandparents' house. We would make haunted houses for them to go through. It's just fun. So to have a movie just based around this is already a sell for me. You know, I'm already into it. And this being a found footage movie, like you said, that takes you through actual places that exist, I want to see these places. I want to see what they are. I want to check it out, you know, regardless of the plot of the movie. So it gets me in the spirit of things.
It's funny because obviously I had never heard that story of yours before, but it's interesting. The people were nice and looking out for kids, which I guess shouldn't surprise me because we've talked about this before. We've talked to people who go to horror conventions and stuff, and they say that horror fans are really some of the kindest people they've ever met. But this movie isn't. This movie will make you think that going to these kinds of attractions is dangerous.
Puts you in peril.
and to be fair, you know, what these folks are doing, it's 5 friends. They are looking for the most extreme haunted attractions. Like that's what they want to find, is the most extreme. And I've never done that. I've never sought those out, and maybe they exist, but this movie makes it seem like you may legitimately be putting yourself at risk. In fact, like, there are a couple of scenes where the workers at these different events are aggressively hostile towards our characters. And you know, that hasn't been my experience at all, but maybe it does happen.
No, me neither.
The truth is, I don't, you know, they're seeking these things out where, like, there are no rules. You know, I think that it's kind of generally understood at most of these things. The people who are working them will do whatever they can in their power to frighten you, but you are safe. That's the expectation. And most of the time, like, they won't touch you. You know, they might chase you. They might chase you and they might menace you.
They're prohibited from touching you.
But yeah, but they won't touch you. You're fine. And that's, in this movie, not the case. But again, that's what they're seeking out. They want... Yeah. It's actually, you know, pretty clever. They are interviewing the employees at these places and asking them, what have you heard about the most extreme places? What can you tell us about the most extreme places? And all of it is rumor. You know, nobody can say with any kind of certainty that these extreme places actually exist. It's always, well, I've heard about this place here, or I've heard about this attraction here, so that you never really know if it's real, but that's what they're seeking out.
Well, and that's kind of the nice thing about it, right? Haven't we all? I mean, I don't know about you, but I lived near Detroit for, I guess this would have been between my grade 3 and grade 6. I lived in Detroit, and there was a rumor that was going around at the time about a haunted house that was 6 stories high, each story being progressively more and more scary. And you paid $6 to get in, and after every floor, they would give you $1 back. So the idea was that if you could make it through all 6 floors, you would get to go through this haunted house for free. But nobody could ever get through, you know, the 6th floor because it was just, all of it was just so scary. And, you know, to my 4th grade, 5th grade mind, that sounds entirely plausible. As an adult, it sounds extremely ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, like, these stories, they exist. And then there are very real things that have happened in these haunted houses,
Right.
not to discount the fact. At the same time, when I lived in Michigan, there was a news story about a haunted house attraction where there was a scene. It was like, I think it was like a hospital scene, and there were people under sheets on tables and things that were then going to spring out, and scare people. And somebody went through this attraction being a wise guy, thinking he was going to be silly and show off in front of his friends. And he picked up a prop from the room, which happened to be an actual axe, which is really stupid.
Right.
Like, you should not have real weapons anywhere near these attractions. But anyway, there was a real axe there, and this person picked up one of these axes and axed one of these, thinking that it was a dummy under the table, and it was actually a person, and that person got injured. I don't know if they got killed, if they got injured, or what, but this actually happened. So, not only are there legends and stories about these haunted attractions that are so extreme and, crazy stuff happens, but there are also stories and truths about actual accidents that happen in these places because of neglect, or people are just going through and trying to impress their friends and be silly and cause harm. So there's sort of both sides of this coin, and I think that this story plays off of that.
Yeah, the movie addresses it directly. There's lots of script like on the screen, especially in the first part of the movie. It starts out with a quote that says, "I'm not afraid of werewolves or vampires or haunted houses. I'm afraid of what real human beings do to other real human beings." It's a quote from Walter John Williams. I don't know who that is, but that makes sense. But then another thing that they tell us, we see on the screen in print, is pressure to deliver the most extreme experience imaginable has led to a dramatic increase in accidents, injuries, and crimes. And I imagine that that's probably true. I don't know if it's true or not, but they tell at least one story about a performer in a scene where they were supposed to be hung by the neck, somehow accidentally was really hung, and nobody realized it, until the end of the night. And I can imagine that happening. We've talked about this before. We've talked about how, 4th of July, if you're going to shoot somebody, do it on the 4th of July. Because, it's the same thing with Halloween. Like, we watched a movie, Satan's Little Helper, years ago. Do you remember that?
I do.
Where this crazy killer is going around killing all of these people and then like setting up their bodies like Halloween displays, and everybody just thinks it's awesome. Like, so I can imagine how things like that could happen, because you expect to see carnage, you expect to see bodies. So if there is an accident where somebody is legitimately injured or killed, you might not give it much of a second thought, because that's what you expect to see. Now, how often that actually happens, I have no idea, but they play on that here. I don't know. Like, so the whole movie basically is just them traveling around in a sweet RV.
Oh, I would love this RV.
I would live in that RV.
We had a camper, and it was this RV, but like in half, like cut it in half, and that was ours. So it was way more cramped than this one. Oh God, that's the whole time I was watching it. I was like,
this RV is much nicer than any apartment I ever lived in college, and bigger too. But anyway, it's these 5 friends, they're traveling around in this sweet RV, and they just keep going to different attractions. And the places they go, I think they're in Texas for most of the time.
Seems like it, yeah.
We see them going through these haunted houses, and they look like really good haunted houses. One of the things that I liked, and that they actually comment on, is they tend to arrive early, like when the sun is still out, and so they see the preparation. They see the things. The haunts are pretty much set up, but they see the performers getting into makeup and getting into costume, and just standing out back of the place, like smoking cigarettes and stuff. And that was interesting to see. I feel like it would be really cool to kind of get to see the behind the scenes stuff. And they do get to see that.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's just them going through the haunts, and the haunts are good and they are scary. And throughout, consistently, then there's some weird stuff that's going on that ultimately culminates in the big finale. But really, it feels... I mean, they are filming it as though it's a documentary. And so in many ways, it feels like a documentary.
It does.
Like a fan-made documentary.
I would like a really cheap, couple, like if you and I were to go out with a few of our friends and like...
With a camcorder, yeah.
Yeah. And the one thing I would say is it felt very legitimate. Like sometimes, acting feels like acting, especially with actors who don't have a lot of credits to their name. But in this case, it all felt quite real because...
Yeah.
Well, the movie... Okay, so it's Bobby, Mike, Zach, Jeff, and Brandy. There's only one girl here, which I thought was kind of unusual. Bobby is Mike's brother. He's got the long hair. Mike is the dude running the camera half the time. He's got a beard. Zach is sort of the leader of the operation. And then there's Jeff, who we don't actually see too much of or hear too much of for most of it.
No.
And it kicks
I had a
off.
hard time keeping track of them.
Yeah, me too. I had to constantly go back because it doesn't really matter, right? It's just these
No,
five
it doesn't.
people.
They're just friends. Like you said, they seem real. Mm-hmm. They seem like people I would be friends with. My favorite one was Mike. They call him Mikey. He's kind of a portly guy, but he also appears to be kind of the womanizer of the group.
Yeah.
The jokester, and he's funny. I really enjoyed him. And the fact that there is only the one woman, and she, Brandy, whose girlfriend is she? She's one of their...
I can't remember.
Zach, I think. I'm pretty sure. I think she's Zach's girlfriend, and I think that's kind of why she's there. But it was smart, I think, for them to include at least one woman. This could have very easily been a buddy type thing, a bunch of guys going around. I think it was smart to include one woman because, sadly, realistically, I think that women are probably more vulnerable in these types of situations.
Yeah.
I think it's an opportunity for jerks and creeps to get handsy and, say that it's for the sake of the haunt or whatever.
Potentially.
But it comes up here. I mean, she does get touched in ways that she doesn't want, that make her uncomfortable. And there are times when she either accidentally or somebody does it intentionally, she gets isolated. And the threat just seems, when the guys are in peril, I'm worried that they might get hurt or killed. When the woman is in peril, I'm more concerned. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that sound super sexist?
No, it makes total sense because I think that the reality of life is that women are generally more in peril than men are because men can be such scuzzbags.
Yeah.
And men don't even realize they're being scuzzbags. They don't realize sometimes that they're making women uncomfortable by making their locker room talk around them. They don't understand that women feel threatened by that. That's a little lesson we all need to teach our sons.
Well, yes, absolutely. And especially because she's alone. Like if she had another woman or other women with her, there's power in numbers, but she's alone. Which makes her even more vulnerable, I think.
But let's be clear. I mean, she's completely comfortable, it seems, around the guys she's traveling with.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah,
they're all
absolutely.
friends.
And they look out for her, yeah.
But I think the movie does a good job by, sort of doing a foreshadowing bit at the beginning where they show her. Later we realize it's her, but at the beginning we haven't been introduced to her. A woman getting thrown into a trunk by some people in costume.
Yeah.
Get her in the trunk, and these guys put her in there, and she's clearly like sort of like maybe drugged or something, or she's been knocked out, and she's kind of coming to her senses, and she's in the trunk, and she kind of wakes up, doesn't really say anything. I think that was a good way to start out the movie because it gives us something to look forward to. It kind of makes us realize things are going to get serious later on.
Yeah.
And then it kicks us back to 6 days earlier. We're in Tyler, Texas. We're in a bar, and we meet everyone. And actually, what I really liked about this bit of the movie, and as you said, sort of the whole movie, is that these guys, because they're going on this journey to find the most extreme haunted house, led by Zach, they're at this bar, and they just chat about what's scary, what scares them. They talk about haunted houses and their experiences with haunted houses.
I've heard people talk about the ones that, like in New York, they zip tie you to a chair. Stop it.
What about bags over the head, that kind of thing? That's a different story. It's just like movies. It's the same thing. It's changed. JC's haunted houses in the 60s. You walk around and guys jumped out and said, boo. That doesn't cut it anymore.
When you were little going through haunted houses, you didn't know if it was real or not, right? The element, what that feels like, I want to find it again.
They talk about how do they recruit people to work this. And one theme that keeps coming up through the movie, which is so dead on that it's kind of a little too obvious, is they keep bringing up, how do they recruit people to work this thing? They don't do background checks on workers. There could be really creepy people working in these things. They probably wouldn't even know because they're just these sort of, 1 month off deals. And that keeps coming up again and again to the point where it gets hammered into you pretty early on that this is going to be a movie about haunted houses where some less than savory people with less than savory intentions were hired to work there. So that's like the premise of the movie. Now, as you and I chatted about earlier, I just kind of want to point out, I don't really think this actually happens too much. I mean, certainly, who knows? Things can happen. But the reality of the matter is there's insurance, there's liability, there's all kinds of shit that the owners of these haunted houses that have thousands of people that go through them every single day have to keep an eye on. And there is no way in hell that they're lackadaisical about who they hire and, their behavior in these things. One untoward thing and they would get fired. I just want to throw that out there.
Right. Well, and as you very much, you definitely should, because you're absolutely right. I think that the vast majority of these attractions are perfectly safe. But the movie makes me question if there is a subculture that I'm unaware of. Are there these underground places that probably do not concern themselves with liability and whatnot? And I honestly don't know. If they do exist, I am unaware of them. But
theoretically
maybe
that's right. Yeah,
it could be. Well, and that's something that I give the movie credit for. It gives me a sense of unease that even though I would never anticipate that anything like this would happen, it could happen. You know what I mean? And I like that in a scary movie. That gets under my skin, thinking this could happen. I don't think it would, but it could.
I mean, this is the thing, and it's ripe territory for this. As they're in their RV now and they're traveling, we get a lot of footage of them chatting back and forth about it, and I think it's interesting. I was not bored. I actually really wasn't bored by this movie. Maybe just because I'm interested in this, the subject matter, but I wasn't bored because they're chatting back and forth about this. And one thing that Zach constantly is talking about is where we're going. There are no rules. There are no regulations. We're going to like the backwaters of America, like backwoods of Texas and these things, which once again, as I said earlier, like these haunted attractions are often set up by just the local people. There is no formal regulation around it. There's just the local Kiwanis Club or whatever that sets up this thing.
Yeah.
Anybody theoretically could do it, start charging admission, and then they're gone, a week later. So that is, ripe territory for this possibility. So you're right, it does put you on edge. And they talk about this openly.
I feel like the only haunts I've ever been to are the ones at like theme parks or something like that, where the scariest thing is somebody running up to you while you're waiting in line for a hot dog or something.
I promise you, they're not going to be like that. If we're going to be out in the country, there's going to be no rules, no regulations.
I don't know how this sounds like a good thing.
I know. This is always what you wish. There's going to be no rules, no regulations. You don't even know where we're going.
However, it's very clear that the first few haunted houses they come to are, they're just like they're full of people and there's nothing untoward happening there except for some creepy folks who keep popping up.
That's the thing. Like they are, I don't know, they're good. They're good haunts, but they're fairly typical.
Yeah.
And it seems like you can kind of tell, for the most part, who probably are the real people who just work at these places and the patrons of these places. Because I do imagine that they just filmed these on real locations, I would guess.
Yeah.
But at every single one, there's at least one person in costume that seems off.
Yeah.
And of course, this is documentary style, so they're just swinging the camera around, and the camera will just catch these people who are usually standing very still and just staring at them from the very beginning. And that is part of the movie that I don't know. Like, I don't know if I can really get on board with this because, yes, at every single attraction, they are talking to people and asking, what's the most extreme haunt? Have you heard any rumors? And they're getting little bits of information every now and again. And eventually they hear about this group or haunt called Blue Skeleton. Or something like that.
Yeah.
And they keep getting little teeny tiny bits of information. Ultimately, they end up encountering this group.
Yeah.
But it seems like from the very beginning, this group is looking out, is watching them, has their eyes on them. And I suppose that it could be true because they are also frequenting chat rooms like extreme haunt chat rooms, so they have an online presence. So maybe this group, whoever it is, our friends, our 5 people, maybe they caught this group's attention via their online presence. But I don't know. I found it a little hard to believe that they were watching them the whole time.
I did too. It's super far-fetched. We'll get to the culmination of this later, but suffice it to say that at every attraction they go to, there's some character who's weird. At one, it's a clown. At one, it's a girl with kind of a white mask on or whatever.
Like a porcelain doll kind of face.
Yeah, and so they just the camera lingers on them and they seem off, and then you see them later when you shouldn't see them later.
Right.
Because they're literally traveling miles down the road to different attractions.
Right.
So the idea is there are these weird people working at separate haunts miles and miles away from each other that are somehow in cahoots.
Well, see, and that's not even what I thought. I just thought that they were following them. It's this group, whoever they are, this extreme haunt group, and they're following this
group of people.
Group of 5 people.
Yeah.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, but it is spooky.
Yeah.
When you can pick out the ones that just don't quite fit in to everything else. Like they stand out and you can pick them out. And at one point, one of the guys before they even go in, one of the guys goes to take a piss in the woods. And this creepy guy in a bunny suit, messes with him.
Yeah.
But then ultimately just leaves him alone.
Which is typical for these things.
Well, yeah. And you, right. And at other times you see people in full costume, which I also thought was interesting, getting in their faces or confronting them or standing in the road and blocking their car. And one of the things that I liked about that was I thought, you can't see, regardless of what the costume is, you cannot identify the person behind the costume.
Right.
They're completely anonymous.
Yeah.
And I thought that was creepy too.
There was one scene that I really liked that I thought was really poignant, and that was they're camping. And it's early on, but it's when they're outside of one of the haunts, but they decide to park their camper by the side of the road and they're going to sleep, and they build a little campfire and they're all chatting. And there's this dude, it's a black guy who just kind of comes out of nowhere towards them from the woods. And, they're chatting about this stuff, and then Bobby's, like, talking to him about the haunts, because he realizes he's from this haunt, which I guess is up the street, because he's kind of in makeup and stuff.
He says he lives in the woods. Like, I didn't know what to make of this guy.
No, it was a little weird, but Bobby says to him,
Which haunt do you work at? The one down the road?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going there next, I think.
Yeah.
We see a bunch of kids in a lot of these haunts because no one's calling social services on them. They're like 8, 9 years old. You know, it's like hearing like backwoods shit. There's no rules. There's none of that stuff. What you mean backwoods?
like he's offended, and they don't really know how to respond to that because they don't want to offend this guy. It just sort of sets this tone, right? Like, I don't know, it's like a mix, right? It's a mix between unhinged people and also people who are upset, like sort of a Deliverance vibe, I suppose. That was a clever scene. They do zombie paintball, which is something I heard about, never did, but sounded like a blast.
That was awesome. I had never, and I've seen this movie before, and I completely forgot that part, but no, that was so cool.
Right?
That would be so much fun. It's like, it's just a hay ride where you get to shoot zombies with paintball guns. That's awesome.
It's so cool.
That's kind of one of the last fun things because then they get tipped off about this place and I think that they find out that it's going to be in Louisiana, so they start heading that way. They stop at a horror themed strip club.
Oh god.
Which is like that was weird.
That's the most unappealing thing I can think of. I do not want to see if anyone's going to be shaking their boobs in my face. I don't want them to be a zombie. No, I don't want stuff on their face.
That was kind of weird. But then they also somebody gives them like a clue that they have to go to this little bar in some hole-in-the-wall town, and they go, and it's the creepiest ass bar I've ever seen. Like, apparently it's a bar exclusively for people who work at haunts.
Yeah.
And so, like, they're in various stages of costume and makeup. And there's this creepy ass clown that like dances around them, and the girl Brandy gets cornered in a bathroom by a couple of big guys who are messing with her.
It's supremely messed up.
That was a really it's unbelievable. Like, this place only exists in a horror movie.
Yeah.
I understand that there are some rough bars in America, but come on.
Not this place. Yeah, it's true.
And then people start messing with them, like, pretty intensely.
Yeah, they're in their van, and we see, well, like you said earlier, there's a shot of when they wake up and there's banging on their van and then on their camper and stuff, and they wake up and they flip the headlights on, and they're surrounded by people in costume, several of whom we've seen before from the haunt, and then the lights go out and shit happens and whatnot, and then when the lights come on, nobody's there. So we're getting the sense that these people, like you said, are uniquely being terrorized, which is very unrealistic, but whatever.
At one point, I don't know if it's their camera, but the camera is being held by somebody who we don't know who it is, because it's nighttime and everybody's asleep, and we see all of the 5 friends are sleeping, so we don't know who the camera person is, and it's very creepy.
We've seen this in another movie before, right? This whole idea that everybody's sleeping, but somebody's behind a camera in night vision, and they're filming everyone as they're walking around and like poking at them all.
Now that you say so, yeah, but I don't know what it was.
I don't remember the movie, but yeah, we've seen this at least once before, yeah.
So they're really getting messed with at this point, like people beating on the camper and all kinds of weird stuff. But eventually they wake up one morning, there's noise outside, they go outside and they find a pumpkin, and it has a note on it that says "Carve me," and so Zach, I think, cuts it open, and there's an invitation inside the pumpkin from this blue skeleton group, and it says, "Meet us on Bourbon Street tonight." It's Halloween now, and there are masks, blue skull masks for each of them left on the dashboard. And so they go to Bourbon Street again. I can only imagine. I don't know. I would imagine they probably just filmed on location and planted a few people.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're on Bourbon Street. They go up and down. They're looking for blue skeleton folks. They can't find them. Eventually, one of them, I don't remember which one it was. It doesn't matter. One of the guys sees somebody in a blue skeleton mask duck into an alley.
Yeah.
And he, like an idiot, follows this guy down the alley. Like, he's calling for the other people to follow him, his friends to follow him, but they don't hear. And so he goes in there by himself and is confronted and surrounded by all of those creepy characters that we've seen before.
Yeah, there's like a girl, there's a clown, there's that rabbit from the woods. They're all there.
Yeah.
Like all these people who over the last 2 weeks or whatever they've seen at these random haunts around have presumably been following them and scheming to corner this guy down an alley so that they can bag him. It's dumb. And then I think it's dumb. And then I think that was Jeff maybe or Bobby. Anyway, Zach.
I think it was Jeff. I don't know.
Yeah, Zach tries to call him. He gets a voicemail that says to meet them at a particular intersection in the woods so that they can finally go to Blue Skeleton, which is what Zach's been trying to do this whole time, and sort of been half directed by this online group and half directed by the people. He met some people in a haunt who were like, oh, Blue Skeleton, blah, blah, blah.
That was frustrating to me, too, because I feel like even at this point, when one of their friends has been abducted, Zach is still like,
let's go find Blue Skeleton.
oh, it's just part of the thing. This is what we were looking for. It's just part of dude, your friend got abducted.
Yeah.
Like, that's serious. Like, this isn't fun. And the other friends, that's their response too. They're like, this isn't cool. This isn't fun.
Yeah.
But he's still kind of into it. So they meet them at the intersection. Like, somehow they're texting Zach, I think the blue people are, and they're like, come out of the bus within 60 seconds or your friend dies.
Yeah, there's a school bus there that pulls up. But they're like, come out of the RV in 60 seconds or your friend will die. And then there's some argument. Zach goes out. He approaches the bus. There's an explosion, which breaks the windows of the RV. And then two guys with the skull masks and clown masks come into the RV. And now, basically, everybody's being led outside with bags over their heads. One of the Blue Skeleton guys have picked up their camera. Remember, this is all found footage. So
right.
Now it seems to be someone from like Blue Skeleton who's filming. And by the way, in the beginning of the whole beginning of the movie, there was some text on the screen that said that this was put together with footage from these guys plus footage from the Blue Skeleton people or whatever. So they take the guys off the bus, but they leave Brandy on there.
It seems like they split them all up, and it seems like they kind of set them in like individual little haunted houses that maybe interconnect because eventually their paths cross.
Yeah, this is so disappointing.
It was kind of disappointing.
Well, look,
I didn't know what was going on. Actually, what I was thinking was, this is it. Like, this is what they were looking for. This is the extreme experience they were looking for. Yeah, I just thought, oh, well, I guess it really is. It's just real. It's a really extreme haunt. But that's what I at this point I thought, oh, it's just a haunted house.
It's lame shit. I this is where the movie fell apart for me. Brandy's on this bus now or whatever, and somebody says to her, count to 30 seconds and remove your hood, and there's going to be a video camera sitting right next to you. Pick it up and record everything you see. I'm thinking we're getting into like Saw type shit here, right?
Yeah.
They cut her ties and she does it. Nobody's there. She gets off the bus. She approaches this shack basically. And then we see the camera view of someone who I'm not sure who it is. It might be Mike. It's like he's in a cabin or something similar. It might be the same one. Who knows? He's like sort of wandering around. Then there's somebody else with like all they have is a glow stick to like kind of light themselves. They might be in the same cabin. Who knows? But then they eventually meet up with each other because someone, I'm not sure who it is, it might be Zach, sees Michael in a room. So like the lights suddenly come on and there's sort of a window, but it must be soundproof because Michael springs up and he's in this room and he's banging around. And then, I don't know, like Bobby gets stabbed or something. And then we go to Brandy, who gets put in the trunk of a car. I mean, it's just like, here's the deal. The whole premise was set up. And this was the thing I was excited about, was this lore of the most extreme, scary haunted house, right? That they're looking for.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they all just end up becoming abducted. It's not a haunted house they have to go through. They're just kind of like...
Well, I mean, they're being menaced a little bit.
They're being menaced a little bit, but it's not...
I don't know. Somebody chases one of them. There's like a creepy little girl. That was weird. Like a child.
Yeah,
that was weird.
But at the end of the day, they just, like, Brandy gets thrown in a trunk, and
then they all get...
Yeah, they wake up in coffins. She wakes up in a coffin. Mike's in a coffin. And then we just see from the outside they're being buried alive. Which is horrifying, by the way.
Right.
But that's it. they all wake up.
Yeah.
We see that they're being buried by the people who are wearing the masks that we saw earlier. It's the end of the fucking movie. It's not a haunted house. Like, what, this whole blue skeleton haunted house thing, like, what? No. Oh, God.
Right.
I was disappointed. Sorry.
What do these people get out of this? Like, are they just masochists who like to kill people? So they set up these elaborate things and follow people across states to take them through a lame haunted house? Like, any of the other haunted houses that they visited throughout the movie were way better than the last one. So, like, you didn't even you didn't even get your money's worth.
Totally not.
And then they just get buried.
Look, we've seen haunted house, like haunted movies centered around haunted houses. There was Hell House LLC,
which that underwater haunted house.
What was the one? What was the one where, again, people go to this random haunted house out in the middle of nowhere, and they're the only people there, and they're going through rooms and things, and like they get separated and stuff. What was that one? I don't know.
I don't know.
But anyway, like, we've seen great movies themed around haunted houses that, like, kind of were consistent and paid off. This movie just, I think, falls apart 3/4 of the way through. And the reason I was on board with them was because it was a found footage movie, and they were talking about something I loved, and there was this authenticity to them visiting. Like, I actually enjoyed the footage of them going through these ostensibly real haunted houses. That was sort of fun for me. It kind of got me excited for Halloween. And then they're talking about hitting this urban legend haunted house that everybody's, rumored, and they go there, and it's not even a haunted house. It's just psycho people kidnapping them and then burying them alive. It's no fun.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's such a letdown. It's just like, you set up a premise, man. You can't just like not deliver on that premise. You just completely let me down. So I was super disappointed.
That's funny. You would probably be even more disappointed because there's a sequel, right?
I heard. I would.
And there is a sequel.
Have you seen it?
Yeah. Spoiler alert. It stars all the same people. So I don't remember how they explain it. But they're all alive.
Does it redeem this movie in some way?
No. Honestly, like, this is the second time I've seen this movie, and I thought I remembered liking it, but it did not hold up on a second viewing. I actually was kind of bored. But to be fair, I've seen it before, so there were no surprises. I knew what was going on. I kind of vaguely remember liking the second one too. It's bigger in scope. I feel like they probably had a bigger budget. But ultimately, it's kind of the same movie. So yeah, if you didn't care for this one, you can skip the sequel. I appreciated, the effort. Like, you're right. Like, it was a good idea. It's an interesting subject. It was cool to see I realized that this is fiction and that it was set up or whatever, but there's a documentary element to it where you get to see these real places that were really cool. And it looked like a really fun environment with people really celebrating the season, and then, of course, just horror in general. That part of it was fun. The narrative was a little stupid. but that's also not to say that there weren't creepy moments. Those people in those costumes, which by the way were good, scary costumes, they were very menacing, and it was tense. I did feel tense in some of those moments. I didn't need to see it a second time. I won't watch it again. But it's not awful. I wouldn't warn people away from it. There are things in it that I am glad to have seen, but not one of my favorites.
Well, here's what I would say in summarization. In the spirit of getting you in the mood for Halloween, the first 3/4 of this movie, if you just watch it as a kind of documentary and you just want to get stoked for haunted houses and see some other haunted houses and just kind of get in the mood of things and that, like, it's great. I really enjoyed that part. I feel like this is something I could have gone out and done with my friends.
Right.
But trying to make a narrative out of this that ultimately ends up in a horror movie, like, it was a lame tack on that ultimately just felt stupid and not satisfying. And then to find out.
So thank you for your recommendation, patron.
Yeah. Just like watch the first 3/4 and then don't watch it again. And then like don't expect a horror movie out of it. Just watch it as a documentary and get to see some cool haunted houses. And to find out there's a sequel to this that picks up where this one leaves off, like, I don't even know, man. I don't think I don't think we'll ever get to it because I'm not interested.
Yeah, I don't know unless we just run out, which I don't see happening. But
that's not going to happen.
I honestly, I don't have as negative feelings about it as you do. I think it's okay. I think it's fine.
Well, I told you I was on board at 3/4 of the way through. I was really into it for a little while.
Yeah. I'm not mad about it. I'm not mad that I saw it. And I honestly, in all sincerity, I appreciate the recommendation because if I hadn't seen it, it would be a movie that I wanted to see. So I do appreciate the recommendation.
Thank you to Leisha and Heather.
Yes. And it's very much in the spirit of Halloween, and I love Halloween, so it's all good.
All right, well, thank you again for listening to another episode. If you enjoyed this one, please share with your friends. We have a couple more Halloween episodes coming your way this month, so stay tuned. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/chainsawpodcast. You're going to find a lot of goodies on there, some mini-sodes that we record every month, as well as a long interview with us and the completely unedited version of our phone calls that result in this podcast. Happy Halloween to all of you. Until next time, I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
With 2 guys and a chainsaw.